Hey everyone, welcome back to the Haunted Corner. I'm Ashton, and I'm finally back from a month-long hiatus. I hope you all had a great month because I sure did. I spent a lot of time with my boys. We took a day trip up to the Stanley Hotel, which you may have seen if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook. We had a great time at the hotel. We love Estes Park, and we're fortunate enough to live close enough to take day trips up there quite often. So I talked my boys and my parents into going up there with me. Next time, we're going to be doing the nighttime tour, which I'm really excited about. I met this really kind woman who worked in the whiskey store, and I shared the podcast with her. So if you're out there and you're listening, thank you for the sticker that you gave me. I loved it, and you made my day, so thank you for that. But we didn't have anything spooky happen to us while we were there, but I did have a really delicious margarita in the restaurant, and we saw a ton of wildlife. But aside from that, I did a lot of relaxing during the hiatus. Up until December, I really only read for the podcast and for research purposes, right? But I decided to spoil myself and buy a book on Christmas. I bought Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So if you know, you know. It's really good. Then I read Iron Flame, of course, book 2. So that's where it got started. I loved Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So I highly recommend those. I can't wait for the third book in the Empyrean series, whose release date was just announced for January of 2025. And yes, I already pre-ordered that one. But then I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and quickly fell down that rabbit hole. So I read all of those books, and now I'm reading Throne of Glass. So if you know, you know. If you want to talk to me about books, let's talk about it. I'm really excited about the escape that books have been bringing me lately, though. So that's about it. I had a really nice and relaxing hiatus, but I am really excited to be back. And today, boy, do I have a story for you. We're coming back from hiatus with a bang, and yikes. This may not seem like a topic you'd expect to be covered on the podcast, but this story deserves to be told, and I'm glad to be the one to share it with you. The sources used in today's episode will be listed on the blog post, which will be linked to in the show notes. Today, I'm going to share the story of Omayra Sanchez and the eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano. Let's get into it. This story begins in the fall of 1985 in Colombia. A woman named Marta Lucia Galvache Velasco, the technical director of the Colombian Geological Service, was studying the Nevado del Ruiz volcano. This volcano is located within the Andes Mountains and is part of a group of 5 ice-capped volcanoes. These volcanoes lie within what's known as the Pacific Ring of Fire, which contains some of the world's most active volcanoes. Marta and her team had been studying the Nevado del Ruiz volcano and monitoring an increase in seismic activity for about a year. After a slight decrease in seismic activity, it once again increased, culminating with an ash ejection on September 11th, 1985. Marta and her colleagues submitted a report to the Colombian Congress that described the geological history of the site and warned of the likelihood of an eruption within the next months or years. This warning was ultimately disregarded. After all, the volcano had been inactive for 69 years. But then, in early November, volcanic activity increased once again. As magma neared the surface, the volcano began releasing increasing quantities of gases rich in sulfur dioxide. On the evening of November 12, 1985, when ash started falling on Armero, a fire truck went through the town telling everyone to stay home, to not leave home, or to panic. One of the residents, named Gabrielina Ferruccio, went to church to ask for advice. When she arrived, the priest told her to, quote, "Enjoy this beautiful show. It will never be seen again." On November 13th, 1985, Nevado del Ruiz began to erupt, sending a cloud of ash 30 miles into the air. Despite this, many of the residents in the area refused to evacuate, possibly believing they had more time, but they were wrong. Flowing mixtures of water, ice, pumice, and other rock debris poured off the sides of the volcano, forming what are called lahars that flooded into the river valleys surrounding the volcano. These lahars joined normal river channels, and massive flooding and mudslides were exacerbated by heavy rain. Within 4 hours of the eruption, the lahars traveled over 60 miles. The first town to be hit by the mudslides was the town of Chinchina. The small village was quickly overrun, and over 1,100 people were killed in the process. By the time the flow reached the town of Armero, it had become a nearly 100-foot wall of mud, rock, and ice, traveling roughly 25 miles per hour. And even though the residents could hear the flow coming for over 30 minutes, like a train barreling down the tracks, there was little they could do to escape at that point. Not only that, but radio broadcasts were urging residents to stay put. So you've got this urge to run, to flee, while you're being told to stay and realizing there was nowhere to go. It had to be absolutely horrifying. I can't imagine. When the mudslide reached Armero, though, it wiped out homes, farms, schools, and resulted in the deaths of close to 20,000 people in Armero alone, a town with a population of an estimated 28,700 people at the time. 20,000 people in that town gone, just like that. Rescue attempts began. Many people believed this didn't happen quickly enough, but most of the efforts were being funneled to the highest impacted areas, including Armero. The Colombian Red Cross and civil defense personnel were the principal first responders to the area, facilitating the rescue and medical care for survivors. The Colombian military played a role in the rescue, albeit a small one, mainly in the logistics of the rescue. The military provided helicopter airlift for victims in need of medical care, as well as transporting and distributing supplies and establishing field medical care and shelter facilities. Eventually, they ran into issues with the lack of helicopters in comparison to the number of victims who needed to be evacuated. But resources were being sent to the area through the joint efforts of the international disaster relief community and the individual efforts of over 30 foreign countries. Many feel that the military's response to the disaster was poor at best. Troops were reportedly not dispatched on the ground to participate in the rescue efforts. So there was a lot of differing information about their participation, the military's participation in the rescue attempts, but the government did receive a lot of pushback regarding their participation in the rescue, or the lack thereof. Search and rescue operations continued, but for many it was already too late. And that is where the second half of our story begins. A photojournalist named Frank Fournier arrived in Bogota 2 days after the eruption. He planned to capture the rescue efforts on the ground. It took a 5-hour drive and a 2.5-hour walk just for him to get to Armero. When he arrived, Frank was met by people who were in a state of utter shock and confusion. Many people were trapped by debris with no way out. They were in desperate need of help. And that's when Frank met a farmer in the town who told him of a young girl who was in need of help. Frank followed the farmer to a large puddle where a young girl was trapped from the waist down by concrete and other debris from the house that she lived in with her family. The girl was named Omayra Sanchez, and she was 13 years old. She was mainly by herself when Frank came upon her. Rescuers had tried to get to her, but her legs were pinned between a brick wall and tangled in her dead aunt's arms. The rescuers kept coming back to her, local farmers and some people who had some medical aid. They were trying to comfort her. But meanwhile, the water surrounding Omayra was rising, partly due to continuous rains. By the time Frank Fournier reached her, Omayra had been exposed to the elements for too long, and she began to float in and out of consciousness. Omayra asked Frank to take her to school because she was worried about being late. She told Tiempo reporter Herman Santamaria, who was also at her side, quote, "I'm going to miss a year because I haven't been to school for 2 days," end quote. The volunteers, including firefighters and others from nearby communities, tried to pry and dig the girl free, and at one point they tried to lift the aunt's body away with a rope hanging from a helicopter, but nothing worked. Feeling the need to document the disaster and Omayra's story, Frank began to take pictures. He describes the thought process in a BBC article saying, quote, "When I took the pictures, I felt totally powerless in front of this little girl who was facing death with courage and dignity. She could sense that her life was going. I felt that the only thing I could do was to report properly on the courage and the suffering and the dignity of the little girl and hope that it would mobilize people to help the ones that had been rescued and had been saved. I felt I had to report what this little girl had to go through," end quote. Frank gave the file to another photographer who was heading back to the airport and had the film shipped to his agent in Paris, not realizing at the time just how powerful the photos he had captured would become. Despite pleas to the government from the Red Cross for assistance in Omayra's rescue, there was little that could be done. Rescuers asked for a pump that could remove the water around Omayra in hopes of saving her, but despite their best efforts, the help that they asked for would never come. And Omayra grew tired. She had fought for a long time. She had been so brave, but she was tired. She asked her rescuers to let her rest and bid her mother adios. At 9:45 a.m., just 3 hours after Frank had found her, Omayra Sanchez passed away. The rescuers covered her and her aunt with a blue tablecloth. She had been trapped for 60 hours in cold, muddy water when she died. Her mother, Maria, was notified of her daughter's death. She and her 12-year-old son were the only survivors out of the family. A few days after Omayra's death, one of the pictures that Frank took was published in Paris Match magazine. It's a very well-known picture, and I will include it on the blog post for the episode. Just be warned, it is very devastating to see. It's devastating and powerful. People were outraged by the photo, not truly understanding the situation and the circumstances behind the picture. But Omayra's story had been captured by reporters around the world, and then the picture solidified the end of her fight, and it was published after her death. There was an outcry. People asked Frank why he didn't help her, why he didn't get her out, not knowing that it was impossible. And Frank described his feelings best in a quote, saying, quote, "People still find the picture disturbing. This highlights the lasting power of this little girl. I was lucky that I could act as a bridge to link people with her. It's the magic of the thing," end quote. Over 24,000 people died following the eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano, including Omayra Sanchez. Over 5,000 people were injured, with many needing amputations due to the severity of their injuries. 10,000 people were left homeless after 5,000 homes were destroyed. Also lost were 50 school facilities, 2 hospitals, and 6,000 acres of grain and other crops, as well as many livestock, portions of the agricultural infrastructure, and farmland. The loss of life during the 1985 eruption was due partly to the fact that the authorities would not take costly preventative measures without clear warnings of imminent danger. Because the volcano's last substantial eruption occurred more than 140 years earlier, it was also hard for many to accept the danger of the volcano presented. Locals even called it the sleeping lion. Thankfully, Colombian volcanology grew rapidly and exponentially thanks to the international aid that arrived after the disaster and helped establish a network of observatories. Today, there are 600 stations that monitor and investigate 23 active volcanoes, Additionally, 14 hazard maps have been produced for local authorities to use. The volcano continues to pose an issue for residents. However, residents are still hopeful that Colombia will be better prepared for future eruptions should they happen. The photo of Omayra later won the World Press Photo of the Year for 1985. Omayra's face became worldwide known. Today, she remains the symbol of the Armero tragedy. Her tomb is visited by locals and tourists to honor her. And that is the story of Omayra Sanchez and the 1985 eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm really glad to be back. The sources for today's episode will be listed on the blog post at www.thehauntedcorner.com. It's also linked to in the show notes for easy access. Check out the other episodes of The Haunted Corner, available now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, with new episodes dropping every Thursday. If you're enjoying the podcast and would like to share your support, head on over to Patreon. You'll have exclusive access to the Patreon-only episodes, with a new one dropping this week, so be sure to head over there if you're ready for that. You'll also get early and ad-free access to the regular episodes, plus a lot more. Head over to patreon.com/The Haunted Corner to join now. Follow us on social media at The Haunted Corner on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to tell a friend. If you have a case suggestion or a correction to share, please send it to thehauntedcorner@gmail.com or submit it through the website. Until next time, be kind and take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you soon. Bye.